Good morning, Daisy, and thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. It was awesome to watch your performance at the Drake Music Artist Showcase event, and we thought it'd be a really good idea to grab a short interview with you about your experience of the event generally, what it was like to be a performer, and the creative process as well leading up to it. So, Sarah's got a few questions for you, but first, I was just wondering if you could give us a little introduction.
So my name's Daisy Higman. I'm a visually impaired and disabled artist living in the southwest of England. I work as a composer primarily for the theatre. I'm a voice teacher, so I teach voice and singing to young people in universities and in community settings and in youth theatres. I run a choir, and I've got a theatre background. That's how I kind of got into the work, was via my training as an actor, but I also had kind of a musical skill set from when I was at school and when I was younger. And I found myself doing more and more work as an actor musician and being asked to compose bits and pieces for plays that I was in or for shows that I was doing. And eventually I found myself making most of my work as a composer rather than as a performer. I still do a little bit of that, but yeah, most of my work is focused on that. Also, I work as one of the music support officers at the RNIB alongside Jay, part of the music team. So my work there is supporting blind and partially sighted musicians of whatever age or whatever background to access music however they want to, whether that's as a performer, as a professional artist, as a student, as somebody who wants to go along to their local choir or their local, band. We do a lot of work making sure that they can absolutely have the support they need to do that and to access the music that they want to access. Where this all sort of came about was that I was resident artist at Drake Music for the last 6 months. My placement was focused on creative facilitation because that's a lot of my background, is working with community groups, working with children and young people. And I've done a lot of work with groups of disabled people as well.
So, Daisy, could you tell me a little bit of what Drake Music sort of do and what they're about and what it means to be one of their resident artists?
Drake Music are an arts organisation that exists to support disabled musicians. They've got a couple of different strands to their work. So a lot of the work they do is around technology and using technological innovation to kind of drive access or to support access. They also have a big strand called the Drake Music Collective, which is supporting disabled artists, professional disabled artists and musicians to make work. So the resident artist program was a 6-month placement with the organisation where I was funded to create work and also to work within the organisation. We had two kind of themes that we were focused on this year, which were personal sustainability and radical inclusion. So my role and the other resident artist's role was to support and explore those aims through the different work that we delivered for the charity. The residency had two strands. One was delivering open house sessions with Drake Music's collective of artists. So those are artists they previously supported on similar schemes. And we had open house sessions on a range of different subjects. So we had one on disability protest songs. Where are all the good disability protest songs? Because you don't hear that many. We had one on the power of rest and the importance of rest, which is incredibly important for artists and musicians, particularly with kind of chronic illnesses or long-term health conditions. And it's not always an easy thing to get in the music industry. Rest is quite hard to come by. We had one on taking up space as disabled artists. And then I was also supporting three emerging artists or emergent artists who performed at the showcase alongside me and alongside the other resident artist, Izzy, whose focus was on access. So she was there to look at kind of creative access. I was there to look at creative facilitation. And then the other strand of my time there was working on a creative project. So I was given a seed fund and I had this idea, which I pitched when I applied for the role. And the idea, the question at the heart of the work that I was making was what would the world look like if humanity had prioritized access from the beginning? You know, as we throughout human history, if access had been one of our top priorities, how would the world be different? Um, and we only just started to get into that, and the work we showed at the showcase wasn't necessarily speaking to that, but it was something that felt very important at the time. We were talking again about rest and the importance of rest.
What I'm hearing is that you've done a lot of work with disabled artists, and that's important to you, and also promoting this idea of rest. So, could you explain a little bit and how you sort of merged all those ideas with the work that you do with Drake Music?
In terms of working with other disabled artists, for me, the really important thing is I like to work in disability-led spaces.
Mhm.
I've That doesn't mean I don't work with non-disabled artists. I absolutely do. But what I'm not keen on is being in spaces where a project is being run by a group of non-disabled people for a group of disabled people, because that feels like we're not seen as being. And for one thing, there's a kind of there's a real value to lived experience when you're leading a project with other people, that you bring that lived experience and empathy and understanding to how you lead the space that you're in and how you lead the session. So I was working with two other
Mm.
disabled artists that kind of are local to me in the southwest. Um, and it was important for me to create a space where everyone felt that they could be. I don't know if safe is the right word, because safe spaces, I think those. I'm not sure if I necessarily know what those are, but a space where people could relax a bit and not feel like they had to adjust their behavior or mask. So some of the people I was working with were neurodivergent. They had to mask in order to kind of be in that space, or to compensate, or yeah, we could take our time. We could do things in a way that felt right for everybody in the group. And that is also speaking to some of the things that I need, as someone who's also experienced long-term chronic illness and neurodivergence. The ways that I work best are not necessarily in line with the way that a lot of rehearsal spaces I've been in, the way those have been led. So it was nice to be able to create the parameters of that for ourselves. And I think it also allowed us to go quite deep into some of the frustration and the pain that we'd felt around certain experiences, because everybody in the room got it. Everyone, we weren't having to kind of explain why something was important, because we all knew why certain things were important.
What's sprung to my mind just now is like that need for authenticity.
Mm.
That's what it kind of sounds like, that you like to work in that authentic space. And I, having attended the showcase, I really felt that when I was there, just as an attendee. So I was kind of wondering really how um involved you were with the planning of the event, and sort of ensuring that space was a space where you could, as you mentioned, like be more relaxed and have that time to sort of um be your authentic self. Like how yeah, how involved were you in sort of designing that space and ensuring that it was a disability led space?
Yeah. So, I mean, we were involved with, we were Drake involved us with quite a lot of this from the
Mm.
beginning. There were some things that they held in terms of the organization of the event, and it was a combined effort, with everyone on the team. And the other artist in resident, Izzy, and I, we had a site visit several months before the showcase, where we went up to visit St Luke's and had a tour and spoke to their staff, who were really, really eager and really keen to learn from the process of working with Drake and to improve their own access. And they sort of presented us with this amazing access plan that they created, and were like, "We want, what
Oh,
do you think?"
cool.
Which was lovely, actually. And and I think from the very beginning of working with Drake, what's really impressed me is that you know, I've been able to explain what my access needs are, and they've never been questioned. There's never been like, "Oh, well, I'm not sure if we can."
Mhm.
There are sometimes there are budget constraints that can impact access, and that's I think Miss Jackie, when she was talking about her kind of principles for working with disabled artists, touched on that the you need to make sure that you fund it properly. But Drake put it was a well supported project. We were able to.
Mhm.
There were some sort of limitations in terms of the space that the way LSO is built. Their downstairs rehearsal spaces, because it's used for orchestral, for classical pieces. Generally, the
Mhm.
musicians turn up already in their suits and their kind of concert gear. They dump their coat, they get their instrument, they go up on stage. So, but we managed to find and carve out rest spaces and quiet spaces, which was important. So everybody had, we found a way to work that within the space that we had. Everyone was given a tour and orientation, and I think a lot of it was down to really good communication. So, I well in advance of the project, Drake were collecting access riders from myself and the other artists, from the artists we were working with, and they worked really hard to make sure that everything was put in place. And yeah, it's that preparation, communication, and making sure you funded it properly. I think that's how
Mhm.
you pull off a good event like that. Um, and I don't think there's ever any such thing as perfect access, because people's access needs conflict. Like what I might need. The classic one is things like tactile paving. I rely heavily on tactile paving for navigation. I've got a friend who's a wheelchair user who finds it really uncomfortable to take his wheelchair over. But he also recognises that it's important to make sure, blind people
That
don't
you
walk into the
cross.
road. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sometimes there are needs that conflict, but I think they did a really good good job. Yeah,
Okay, that sounds really positive. And like access was sort of like central to the planning of the showcase, which I kind of think should be, central to any event planning really. So that,
absolutely.
but that's not really the reality, is it? So, I mean, you mentioned when they first started that they showed you like an access plan, and that you mentioned that you were quite impressed with it. So I'm just wondering then, like, how that compares with other events you may have been involved in where sort of access has been more of an afterthought, really, or not really thought about until you've mentioned your access requirements.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the metaphor that I use quite a lot, and it came up at a meeting yesterday actually, is that people use access as like the icing on the cake. They sort of put it on
Mm.
at the end, but actually it should be the flour or the butter. It should be the batter of the cake. It should be, you know, it should be baked in to the project that you're doing. And, that does mean that you have to plan in advance. But it's also worth it, because the more you do it, the better your events will be, and, it will get faster each
Mm.
time. But yes, I've definitely, I won't name any names, but I've worked on projects that have had very, very poor access, where my access needs have been treated as a massive inconvenience. And sometimes I've walked away from projects because, and I don't like to do this, but actually I can't, there are some times where I can't engage with the project without those access needs. And it puts me in a
Mhm.
disadvantage in a space. And that's, you know, no one's having a good time then. I'm not enjoying working creatively in a space um where I don't have what I need to do my best work. And I especially when I was training and studying, that was the case. That there was a lot of trying to, for want of a better phrase, to pass for non-disabled so that I could fit in, so that I didn't feel like I was an inconvenience to people. I've rebelled against that quite a lot now. When I was 21, I felt that very strongly, but now I'm like, if you're not going to support me, then I'm not interested in working with you. It takes a lot of guts to do that. But yeah, and then there's those are like the worst case scenarios where you've got people who really don't, they see access as an inconvenience,
Mm.
and I don't have time for them, and I don't really want to work with them. And I think the industry is changing, and particularly the theatre industry has been changing for quite some time, and moving in that direction. And I've seen the music industry start to follow. Um, the There are also kind of places where it's halfway, where they have good intentions, they're trying their best. Sometimes people will make assumptions about access, and they will put things in place for you without asking what you actually need. And that can be frustrating as well, partly because, you know, sometimes the thing that they put in place won't be helpful to you at all, or will be a hindrance. And sometimes you think, oh gosh, you've spent money on this thing that I don't need. And if you'd just spoken to me, that we could have
Yeah.
used that access budget in a different way. But yeah, I mean, I think in general, I've seen over the last sort of, I'd say 7 or 8 years, quite a big shift towards more accessible practice. It's not universal, it's not perfect, we're not there yet, but it is improving, I think.
So do you think then that we're heading sort of in the right direction to ensure that things are more accessible in the future?
I hope so. I mean, I think it's difficult. I mean, we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and arts funding is being cut everywhere. And
Mm.
I am anxious, or I'm concerned that access might become deprioritized because of that. The big shift I've seen throughout arts organizations has, I think, really been the result of the legacy of the 2012 Olympics, because there was so much funding and work that went into that opening ceremony, and there were so many disabled people involved with that as
Mm.
artists, and that created a lot of momentum, and a lot of sort of funds like the Unlimited Fund, which is worth checking out if you're a disabled artist trying to make creative work. That came out of the 2012 Olympics, and this sort of moment in history where there was lots of energy, um, and lots of appetite for supporting this work. I I am hopeful that it will continue. I'm just slightly worried about the arts in general. So it's a slightly pessimistic answer. I feel like I maybe ought to be a bit more like, yeah, things are going brilliantly, but
Yeah, but we've got to be realistic because I
yeah,
think sometimes if we sort of sugarcoat things and we just go, yeah, it's great, and the reality it isn't, then we don't pick up on what really needs to be worked on and what the real issues are. And
we can't get complacent about it.
yeah,
You know, access is never done. It's not an end product. It's a process, and it's a process and a practice that needs continual work and refinement. There's an art to access. It's not, yeah, yeah.
So, thinking of solutions, were there any examples of how VI access was supported for this concert? Any solutions that we can maybe document and promote?
Mm. So I worked with Drake on the VI access. So I mean, there were things like making sure, and hopefully this was communicated. This is what I sort of spoke to them about, but making sure there were places like Guide Dog that that they were prepped for supporting assistance dog users in the space, that they communicated where the spend areas were, where the green spaces were, that information was available in a range of formats. And again, sometimes there are budget constraints to that. What I generally say to people is, if you can, make sure it's available in an open Word document, because, at the very least, people can then take that file and adapt it themselves to whatever format they need. If you send out a PDF, screen readers can't access it. You can't adapt the font or the size to make that information accessible. I mean, the things that I asked for myself were orientation, so having a tour of the building beforehand, which they were very good about. I had questions about lighting states, and I mean, I also, as an artist, I work with a PA, a personal assistant, so they manage a lot of the guiding for me on and off stage, but it was making sure that all the staff were kind of aware of that and who they were, and that we had a chance to practice things like entrance and exits. Audio description was sort of there. It was one that I think in future they'll flesh out a little bit more, the offer for audio description. There's still maybe a bit of work to do on that, but also they're aware of that, and they kind of went, yeah, actually it's a little bit of a blur, that whole event. I think the most important thing is communicating what you can offer and making sure that the people coming to an event know what's on offer so
Mm.
they can make an informed choice. Saying that
Yeah,
something is inclusive to everyone or accessible for everyone always puts my back up, because it's never true. There's always somebody whose needs haven't necessarily been accounted for, but if you communicate exactly what it is that you're offering in terms of access, I can choose whether it's right for me.
yeah. I mean, what I really appreciated is when I came into the venue and Lisa met me sort of basically at the door and asked me if I wanted maybe a little bit of a tour, or if I'd want a description of the layout. And I thought that was nice, because I think sometimes people assume that because I can't see the space, I want to be guided around the entire space and have everything described to me. And I actually find that like a little bit overwhelming. But
Yeah.
what Lisa did do for me was describe the the bits that were relevant for me. And it just meant that if I wanted to sort of move away from my table and try and go somewhere or do something without sighted guide, then like I could sort of use my guide dog to find different parts of the space, and that's quite nice. And I think for a lot of people that are sighted, like that's not a big deal, but for me it's like it's just that little bit of independence that if I knew the space really well it wouldn't be a problem, but to be able to keep that little bit of independence in that space was quite nice. And I've never really been to an event where I can do that. And it's not because people wouldn't let me, but like sometimes events are just so busy that practically it's just easier to just like, yeah, guide me or whatever. It was nice to sort of have that consideration and that description of the space around me, and sort of not focusing on the parts that I'm not gonna go to because I don't need to know. And yeah, it sort of felt like they took treated everyone as an individual, and therefore we all have our own access needs, and not making those assumptions. And that's quite nice,
Yeah,
because
absolutely. I'm really glad to hear that you had a positive experience, Sarah. And also, you made me think, because I think, do you ever have that thing where someone reads an entire restaurant menu to you and you're going, you just pick the one thing you can remember,
yeah.
because just trying to remember all of the options, like it can get really overwhelming. I don't need to know all of the architectural details of a building I'm in. I just need to know where the toilets are, where the food is, where the exits are. Do you know what I mean? Um, so yeah, and I mean I'm partially sighted. I'm not blind, but there are finding signs and things, and finding the right direction to find the what I need. But the cognitive load of too much information is something I think that gets a little bit forgotten about for VI people. They just sort of, yeah, I don't need to know everything. I need to know the bits I need to know. Yeah, cool.
Amazing. Well, I had a couple more general questions as well, if that's okay. So I was wondering if you could share any examples of how VI access has been supported more widely in choirs or community music opportunities.
Yeah, so I mean, the groups that I run, the first thing I do is make sure that people know that there's an active line of communication for communicating what they need. So when people sign up to my choir, there's a section that says, if you have any access needs, or if there's anything that we can do to support you, please, please let us know. They can either do that there, they can send it to me by email. I give them a couple of different routes for that. And I have an information pack in various different formats that communicates what is already available in terms of what I put in place. So some of that is the wheelchair access. It's a description of what a typical session is like, so people are prepared for what they're coming for, which can be quite helpful for people with anxiety or, again, neurodivergence. I let them know what the kind of formats are that I already provide, and say, if you need it in another format, get in touch, let me know. I can source that. And I pick, I sort of have everything available, both in as sheet music, just as lyrics, as audio tracks. A piece of work I need to do for myself is go back and make sure I've got all of the scores that I use for my choir in an open accessible format. I'm one of the publishers that's a whole other thing, working with, kind of sourcing those scores in those accessible formats. But that's something I've got ambitions to do in the future, is to be able to provide those scores in a wider range of formats than I can at the moment. And I do things like I make sure that carers sing for free at my sessions, so that doesn't become an additional financial cost for people. But the most important thing is making sure people feel that they can trust you with that information, and that they feel comfortable with sharing their access needs, that you get it in advance, that you communicate with them about what is in place. And if you can't put something in place, that you're open and honest about that, and don't try and fudge it, and don't try and make that person responsible. Sometimes the building that you're in is built a particular way, and you can't get around that. And there are sometimes practical limitations that are out of your control. But I think it feels like I'm giving the same answer. It comes back to that kind of that honesty, openness, communication, again and again and again. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you had to apply for the role at Drake Music. I was just wondering how you found that opportunity and how the process came about.
I think it came up on Disability Arts Online. It was definitely posted on social media, and I saw it popping up in a lot of places. I'm fairly certain it was on Arts Jobs as well. So yeah, there was an online application process. There was a form to fill in. I had a few questions that, you sort of had to answer around your kind of ambitions for the project, how you'd use the funding, that kind of thing. And then there was an interview process, and I was selected off the back of that. It's worth keeping an eye out for opportunities on places like, not just Disability Arts Online and Arts Jobs. There a lot of stuff gets posted online. Another one that I use quite a lot is an email list called Open Hire, which is quite a good place to find particularly theatre and like composing and sound design jobs. I find a lot through there.
So one more question to wrap us up. The music that you put together for the concert, is that available anywhere, or will it be?
It will. We just recorded it on Thursday at a local recording studio, and I've not heard the final mix yet. But yes, the plan is that it will probably be featured on the Drake Music website. They have a page for former Drake Music Collective artists, so it will go there, and there's a little video being made of us all in rehearsal. And it will feature on my SoundCloud. And once I've got it, I'll post it everywhere, because I'm quite proud of that one. I'm proud of that song. So yeah, it will be up and about. I'll let you know when I've got it, what platforms I put it on. Yeah. And
Amazing.
the showcase can still be seen on YouTube. There's a YouTube link. I will send it to you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you, Daisy. Like, it's been really nice actually to hear what it's like from your perspective as someone that's been involved and performed at that event, so now we can have like my perspective as an attendee and your perspective as someone that was actually there and performing. And so yeah, that's really nice. And also thank you for your time. I really hope it goes well as well when you release your music, because your performance was great. And I think the fact that you did it a cappella as well, I was just like, oh, because you do have like a velvet voice. So
Thank you very
yeah.
much. Do you want to write all my promotional material?
Yeah, so
Thank
so
you for
thank
having me.
you.